They say never work with children or animals. I can confirm both of those. Today's video is brought to you by craftcomputing.store, the letters I, P, and A, and viewers like you. Or, at least it could be. If you like the things we do here on Craft Computing, consider joining the Patreon. Every contribution helps keep power onto my lights, my server rack, and my beer fridge. Seriously, I would not be able to do the things that I do without the amazing support from my patrons. As little as $1 a month gets you exclusive access to my Discord server, which my amazing patrons from all over the world keep lively at all hours of the day. You can chat with me or the other hosts from our weekly live show, Talking Heads, or simply lurk and catch the ebb and flow of the Craft Computing community. Visit patreon.com/craftcomputing to sign up today. That's patreon.com/craftcomputing, and again, thanks for watching. Welcome back to Craft Computing, everyone. As always, I'm Jeff. Miniature computers are always fascinating to dive into as a reviewer. There are as many designs and form factors as there are brewers of IPAs, and every potential consumer has their own opinions on which features, inclusions, performance, and expandability they consider ideal for their individual use cases. And I undoubtedly know as a reviewer that, regardless of what marks I give this PC, it's going to be the perfect solution for some, and fill others with a vitriol that can only be expressed in a rambling, incoherent YouTube comment about my general ineptitude and my mother's promiscuity. Now that we're all on the same page, let's take a look at the latest offering from MinisForum, somewhere here behind Rambo, in the UM580, an ultra-compact desktop PC featuring an AMD Ryzen 7 5800H, 8-core CPU, Radeon graphics, and a ton of connectivity peripherals and expansion options. The general form factor of the UM580 is very similar to an Intel NUC, with its relatively square footprint of about 5 by 5 inches, and it's only about 1.8 inches tall. The finish is a very nice matte black that seems fairly resistant to fingerprints and other grime, meaning it should be fairly easy to keep clean and presentable if you're looking to have this on your desk or as a living room media PC. The front of the unit features a power button, headphone and microphone jacks, and 2 USB Type-C ports, one being a 10 gigabit variety and the other enabling DisplayPort over USB-C. More on that in just a few minutes. Around the rear, we've got a pair each of USB 2.0 and 3.0 ports, dual HDMI 2.0 ports supporting 4K 60Hz displays, a 2.5 gigabit networking port, and an additional USB Type-C for power input, which also doubles as a DisplayPort alt mode port. Also included in the box is a VESA mounting adapter for securing the UM580 to the back of a monitor, a vertical desk stand, HDMI cable, and the SATA drive connector for installing the aforementioned supported 2.5-inch disc, as well as an optional top plate with no logo if you're looking for a little less bling. That's right, the UM580 is available as a bare-bones kit. Inside of it, you'll find 2 standard SODIMM memory slots, an M.2 slot for an NVMe drive, as well as support for a 2.5-inch SSD. For power, the UM580 uses only USB-C, but they do include an adapter in the box. And I have to say, it's actually one of the coolest kits that I've seen in quite some time. The AC adapter itself has 2 USB-C ports, and is capable of up to 100 watts of power delivery, which is a bit overkill given that the 5800H APU is only capable of drawing 55 watts of power at max settings. I guess this overkill brick might be able to rapid charge your phone or tablet while also powering your new mini PC. But that's not the coolest part. The USB-C cable included in the box also has a micro OLED display embedded in the side of it and is able to display the current power draw from the PC. It's an unnecessary but hugely appreciated addition to the package that makes the whole thing feel slightly more premium. So what are the use cases for a small form factor PC like this? While the Ryzen 7 5800H is a fantastic CPU, featuring 8 cores and 16 threads with a 4.4 GHz boost clock, it's the APU side of things that might keep it from replacing your gaming PC, as AMD opted to keep the Vega 8 graphics core on this processor, seriously limiting the graphical potential. Now, to be clear, this is 100% a limitation imposed by AMD, as they don't currently offer APUs with more than 8 GPU cores, but MinisForum did still use the 5800H inside this desktop. But also to be clear, this is not the same Vega 8 that first appeared in Ryzen's 2200G desktop APUs or 2500U mobile chips. Instead, this is being Instead of being based on the 12nm FinFET, this Vega 8 is on the same 7nm process as the Zen 2 CPUs, and is clocked significantly higher than its older brethren, hitting 2 GHz under boost, while the older chips were lucky to hit 1200. So, there's a ton of CPU horsepower under the hood, but it is a little bit lacking in the graphics department. But don't let that fool you into thinking this thing is absolutely useless. If you're looking for a super compact PC to run multiple 4K monitors, the UM580 supports up to 4 4K displays, all running at 60Hz, thanks to the aforementioned USB-C DisplayPort Alt Mode compatibility. It also makes for a super tidy single monitor PC, given that you can power the PC over USB from a supporting monitor, allowing for a potential single cable setup for a full-fledged desktop PC. But how is it for gaming performance? Is the UM580 powerful enough to use as a Steam console, or even as a standalone gaming PC? While it's definitely not going to slay the latest AAA titles at 1080p, the MinisForum UM580 might be good enough for some casual esports games at lower settings, things like CSGO, Overwatch 2, Rocket League, and the like. But just for good measure, I did try out a couple higher-end titles as well. Doom Eternal, normally a game that is incredibly easy to run, sees an average of just 40 frames per second, with both the 1 and 0.1% lows in the teens. Not a great start, especially considered this was at the high preset, which, contrary to its name, is the second lowest graphics preset in the game. It's kind of like going to Burger King and seeing drinks available in large, extra large, and 5-gallon bucket. Grand Theft Auto V does fare slightly better at normal settings, with an average of 55 FPS and a low of just 34. But keep in mind, this game is 9 years old at this point, so again, this isn't exactly the most impressive feat with today's hardware. Elden Ring, even at its lowest settings, is just flat out unplayable, with an average of just 31 frames per second and a low of 7. Cinematic frame rates are one thing, but I didn't buy an IMAX ticket just to watch a PowerPoint of a Let's Play. Moving on to esports titles, CSGO does manage some decent performance with an average of 121 frames per second and a 0.1% low of 34. It's definitely playable at 1080p, but inconsistent frame rates like this make Twitch shooters a bit more difficult to play. 1 minute you're quickly able to nail a headshot, the next, some 30 FPS jitters might turn you into a spray and pray noob. Rocket League showed some promise with a 63 frame per second average at low settings, but just like Doom Eternal, it didn't have enough horsepower to keep the lows out of the teens. While the experience wasn't terrible, it's hard to recommend this as a gaming machine when it can barely match the experience of the native title running on Nintendo Switch. So I might be sounding pretty doom and gloom here when it comes to the benchmarks. But hold on a second, I'm not quite done. At $550, there is another market that might be able to take advantage of the Zen 3 CPU horsepower inside of here, and that of course is for an emulation machine. Now, I'm not just talking about 80s and 90s consoles, as even Nintendo 64 and PlayStation 1 games are child's play on a Raspberry Pi or any Cherry Trail SBC. No, I'm talking about PlayStation 2, Wii and Wii U, Xbox 360, even a dash of PlayStation 3 and Switch emulation. Because while the Vega 8 graphics processor isn't the hottest thing out there, a 4.3 GHz 8-core Zen CPU makes short work of even the most demanding emulators. Now, I'm not going to focus on a whole spate of games, but I did spend multiple hours bouncing between games and different systems, and had a phenomenal experience overall, starting with one of my favorite all-time games for the PS2 in Burnout 3 Takedown. Using the latest PC SX2 emulator with AVX instructions made short work of this game, running at 3x scale for 1080p rendering and nearly locked 60 frames per second. Burnout 3 is one of the more difficult games to run in emulation, and had known bugs with the skybox for years when using hardware acceleration. But not only is that now fixed, the game plays incredibly well, even with this low-end GPU. Time Splitters 2 is another blast from my college LAN party past, and again has no issues playing at a locked 60 frames per second at 3x resolution scaling. Aiming is quick and precise, and there seems to be no graphical issues or slowdowns that are readily apparent. Overall, PS2 emulation is a fantastic experience on the UM580. Moving on to something slightly more difficult, let's fire up Xenia for some Xbox 360 action. Here I tested out the GoldenEye Remaster Live Arcade Beta that leaked out last year, and wound up playing through over half of the single-player campaign instead of just doing my testing. Oh, and if you were curious, it also plays at a locked 60 FPS. Also, for those wondering, it appears that this game will finally see an official light of day as an Xbox and Switch release later this year, though no word of a PC release yet, but fingers crossed. Red Dead Redemption also played incredibly well on Xenia, and seriously benefits from FXAA being enabled here, as this game was notorious for its alias geometry, which was required to get it running on this generation of console in the first place. Being a 30 frame per second game, you might be slightly less impressed, but just go back and look at it playing natively on the 360, and you'll see why playing this game at a steady frame rate is so impressive here. Playing Breath of the Wild for the CMU emulator, along with the FPS++ mod to enable 60 FPS gameplay, gave some better than expected results, thanks mostly to that Zen 3 5800H doing most of the heavy lifting. Again, the consoles we're emulating here aren't that graphically intensive anymore, and the Vega 8 is more than up to the task of rendering games from 2005 on a PlayStation 2 and an Xbox 360. Even the Wii U and Switch aren't graphically demanding, as it's emulation that will take most of the work. While I didn't average 60 FPS in Breath of the Wild, it still managed to crank out better than expected frame rates well into the 50s more often than not. One thing to note here as well with modern emulators like CMU or Yuzu is that shader cache plays a huge role in emulation speed, so don't be dissuaded from playing a game if it seems a little bit stuttery at first. The first time an animation or a texture loads, there might be a little bit of a delay, but once cached, every subsequent action requiring that information will load from that cache and play back at a much higher rate. Check out this sequence in Breath of the Wild where I blow up a barrel by a bokoblin camp. This is the first time I've blown up a barrel since starting up the game for the first time, and there is a noticeable hang as CMU figures out how it needs to render that action. Reloading my save file and performing that same action a couple more times shows dramatically improved performance, as all the animations and textures are now cached and load from memory much faster. The cache is also cumulative as well, so every time you play the game, you're adding more and more data to the cache, improving performance each and every time. The cache is also permanent as well, so the cache is loaded every time you start the game. Super Mario Odyssey did play on the Yuzu emulator, but struggled to stay above 45 frames per second in most areas, even after playing for a while to build up my shader cache. Not the result I was hoping for, but also not entirely unexpected. So, the MinisForum UM580, a tiny mobile APU-powered small form factor PC with expandable memory and storage, what is the final takeaway? At $550, it's hard to argue with the amount of CPU horsepower per dollar on display here. 8 cores of Zen 3 makes short work of just about any computationally intensive task, whether it be work, games, or even emulation. Graphically, the Vega 8 is far from impressive here, and definitely the weak spot in an otherwise fantastic PC. Again, I'm not blaming MinisForum, as AMD doesn't offer any current-gen APUs with more than 8 compute units, whether it be Vega or RDNA 2 based. But at the end of the day, I have to judge based on the performance that is delivered, and well, it's MinisForum name on this PC. And that really is a shame, as I've seen what the Vega 24 can do when paired with a fairly powerful CPU thanks to my Intel Skull Canyon NUC. So, let's wrap this thing up. If you're looking for a small, high-performance, and lightweight PC that can play just about any emulated game console, and won't look out of place next to your living room TV, it's hard to go wrong with the MinisForum UM580. And as a general-purpose PC, it's hard to imagine getting a CPU with more horsepower in a similarly sized package. But if you're looking for an ultra-compact machine to finally fill that Steam machine niche, unfortunately you're going to have to wait for either AMD or Intel to start packaging some more serious graphical horsepower into their CPUs before we can scratch that itch. And when that happens, I'm sure MinisForum will be happy to give them a home. So, what other use cases can you think of for the MinisForum UM580? Let me know down in the comments below. On your way down there, make sure to drop this video a like and subscribe to Craft Computing if you haven't done so already. Follow me on Twitter at Craft Computing for daily shenanigans like this, as long as Twitter is still a thing. And if you like the content you see in this video and want to help support me in what I do, consider joining the Patreon. Link is also down in the video description. That's going to do it for me in this one. Thank you all so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next video. Cheers, guys. Beer for today is from Hop Butcher Brewing, and it is the Preserved in 3 Dimensions Sabro and Simcoe Hopped Double IPA, clocking in at 7.5%. Where is Hop Butcher? I don't know. There's actually no canning information beyond that on this can. Oh no, there it is. Bedford Park, Illinois. Hop Butcher. Bedford Park. Now we know. All right, so Hop Butchers preserved in 3 dimensions. Here we go. Boy, very, very juicy. Very wet. If you can use that as an expletive for opposite of dry. This is not a drying hazy IPA. This is juice. This is just a juice bomb hazy. And I'm here for it. I have to say, this is definitely a unique flavor profile with those Saburo hops. It's not really sweet. It's actually exceedingly tart with a bit of an odd aftertaste for an IPA. I don't dislike it, but it's incredibly foreign from a lot of your standard juice bomb hazy IPAs. And honestly, I think that's a good change of pace. Think of this less as orange juice and pineapple and a Hawaiian Mai Tai tourist trap drink, and think of this more as like a traditional Mai Tai. A little grapefruit, little lime, a little bit more on that tart and sour side of citrusy. Definitely good. Definitely something that's outside the norm that you would usually get in this type of IPA. And also definitely recommended.